Aloha everyone, and welcome to another video by me, K. Elmer. And in this video I would like to share with you a passion of mine, and that is the study of bioelectrical-magnetic devices and what they can do for your health and your well-being. I'll call this my Electro Healing series, and this is the introduction to just kind of walk through at a very high level the various devices that are on the market today and their classifications and some of the benefits that you can get from them instead of, let's say, going to a doctor and getting chemicals. So, of course, anytime you talk about anything that's not going to the doctor and getting chemicals, you're going to want to have a bunch of disclaimers. So if you don't mind, why don't you hit pause, read this to your heart's content. I'll give you 3 seconds, and then I will then jump off this screen and jump into the material. Ready? 1, 2, 3. All right. So welcome to bioelectrical magnetic devices. And what do I mean by that is that, actually in the allopathic medicine world, which is the world most people are used to thinking when they hear the word medicine or health care, and that's in our current environment today. It's usually the hospitals, the doctors, and that entire environment right there. And then, as you know, there's what those people have called the other folks that provide healing and well-being types of services. They call them the alt medicine, homeopathy, bioelectrics, and so forth. Chiropractors fall in that, herbologists fall in that. But this specific area that has been my passion for close to 20 years is the idea of how can electrical and magnetics affect the human body, and there's reasons why, and there's a lot of science behind that, and I'm not going to get into that because this is high level, but the idea is that it is actually quite sound. There's a lot of science. It goes back well over 100 years in terms of using bioelectromagnetic devices for the healing arts, and actually, if you go into a allopathic type of facility as a hospital, you will find an MRI machine, you will find x-ray machines, you will find devices in there that are electrical based that are used in healthcare for allopaths, and then you will also find them in chiropractic offices and so forth. You'll even find them veterinarians using them as well. And so it's not a new thing for doctors to use electrical devices in the healing arts, but it's also something that if you take it beyond the hospitals, it's considered alt. So there's this real gray, fuzzy line between the two concepts of when is something alt and when is something mainstream. So, but the idea though is that there are numerous devices out on the market today that do just as many devices, do just as many different things. Some of them work, some of them don't. Like I said, I've been been doing stuff like this and researching this and for well over 20 years, and I just have accumulated a lot of different devices and spent a lot of time testing them and trying them myself. So, but on this slide, just this slide alone, you'll find something as simple as this type of unit right here, which is called a TENS, transdermal electrical neural stimulator, and that's actually prescribed by doctors in today's world, where they'll prescribe that for pain management. Then you get all the way up into these types of devices, which are used to primarily in the chiropractic world and in the professional horse racing world. They're used to help animals just basically prepare for and recover from strenuous physical exertion and so forth. So there's lots of different devices. This is right here is a CNR device, and that's developed by the Russians. That's used for a lot of different things, up to including curing types of diseases. So like I said, there's a lot of different devices, a lot of different things that they do, and this video is just going to be an introduction to the 3 main classifications of bioelectromagnetic devices. Just sharing with what I know. Okay, so the 3 basic types are your basics type, which is your static magnetic field devices, and that's basically what they call, they're just magnetic fields, but they're in the term biomagnets in terms of how do you use a magnet to treat or to use it for solving problems, and that's something that essentially that means magnetic field that is not powered. There's no electricity going through it. It's the field itself that's produced by a magnet. And the other two types of bioelectrical magnetic devices are powered up. They're using electricity, but one is called a resonant electromagnetic field device, and another one's called the pulse electromagnetic field device, and we'll get more deeper into that. But those are the basic three. One is sort of a subtle way of affecting the body and the cells, which is just a static field, and then the other ones are actually powered up and energized fields. So let's get talking about the very first one, which I've covered this in a video when I was talking about when I did a C60 video, stir versus sonicate. Stirs are magnetic stirs that laboratories use to stir fluids, and of course they're magnetic stirs. They use magnetic bars and magnetic fields to whip the bar around. And so I covered a little bit of that in that video, and I just want to touch on it at a very high level. This is an introduction, but usually the concept of biomagnets. There's a Dr. Albert Roy Davis is the founder, the father of this type of science. He was the first individual to kind of really buck up against mainstream academia science and saying, look, most scientists view magnetic fields of a magnet. They're, obviously you've heard of North and South Pole. You see that on compasses and things like that. And this is how the mainstream science really kind of looked at magnetic fields. This was way back in the day. Everything's in black and white, so you can imagine how old it is. But then what Dr. Davis kind of came along and spent 30 years of his life trying to prove his theories with experimentation, published everything that he had done, wrote several books, and then along came scientists behind him that have validated his theory. And what his theory was that that magnetic fields are not circular from one field to the other, that he coined the phrase, there's a block wall in between the two different fields, and that North Pole energy is actually separate as opposed to like this. It's an actual separate field than the South Pole field, and that they're actually separated in the middle, and that there would be a different level or a different type of energy coming off the North Pole field than would be the South Pole field. And he did 30 years or more, spent his entire life studying the difference of when he exposed things to just North Pole energy or just South Pole energy, and then of course observing the results and writing numerous books on the subject. Now what the outcome of his work and the scientists that followed that validated some of his findings have produced a plethora of different biomagnet devices that you can find on the planet, on the market today. I'm sorry. And some of those could be as simple as just using a magnet and applying a different field to what you are trying to treat or affect. Different magnets. You can get rare earth magnets. You can use iron magnets and things like that. But in the veterinarian world, you'll see magnetic blankets such as this. They also make them for the hooves and for the feet. To basically treat soreness and I think it's laminitis and things like that in horses. And then it's a quite popular product, and it's validated by the popularity of its use, and you'll find that in barns all across the country in terms of when a horse is a vigorous workout, they'll put a magnetic blanket on it, and it helps actually help the horse recover from the physical exertion. You'll find people selling magnetic mattress covers such as this, or seats that you can sit on. There's bracelets and braces and headbands and all sorts of different wraps where people have incorporated magnets into certain types of devices, or wraps and things like that, where you can just have a way where you can apply a specific pole of energy towards whatever is ailing you, and that could actually help you feel better and treat your injury, whether it be a sprain or just a sore muscle. Now, when you actually look at, I took this section of results from Dr. Davis's book, from the Magnetic Blueprint of Life, page 41, if you want to look it up. And basically, this is kind of just gives you a real high level review of how magnets, the specific energy from the different North or South Pole energy, will affect different aspects. And this is through all of his research. And you can kind of read for yourself. And I just want to point out some of the things that really stand out is in the area of pain, which is the point I made earlier with the horses, that North Pole energy actually can help relieve pain. It can also enhance healing. And it's not uncommon to find the ability to actually use North Pole energy on a magnet placed over a wound, and actually speeds up the healing for it. It relieves allergic disorders. It actually helps improve performance and so forth. So that's kind of one of the reasons why putting that blanket on a horse prior to a race or something like that is actually beneficial. So the North Pole energy throughout Dr. Davis's experiments for all of his years actually implied and proved through his studies that north pole energy of a magnet is very, very positive for living organisms. And then what he also found out was that south pole did the exact opposite, as you can imagine, right? It's the opposite of north. And so he if you read his books, it's quite amazing where he did tests on chickens, he did tests on plants, he did tests on all sorts of different things to see what was the difference, and it was just amazing, especially the one where he did it on baby chicks, where the chicks that were raised in a negative field, their eggs were basically sitting in a negative north pole energy field during their incubation, and when they hatched, versus a south pole, and how the different two groups of chickens behaved was just amazing. The north pole were calm and basically calm, normal, and good birds. But the South Pole ones were aggressive and the opposite. And he did lots of experiments like that. Really fascinating stuff. But he did kind of prove that a magnetic field will have an effect on you as a living being, and it can either have a positive or negative one depending on what the polarity of the field is. So that is the first type of bio-electromagnetic type of device, and these are the subtle energy ones using magnets. And so it's very interesting stuff. A lot more we can go into this at a later date. Now I want to talk about the next one, which are your resonant electromagnetic field devices. And what I mean by resonant, I mean a frequency that is broadcast, like you would like a radio station or a cell phone tower, but it's basically pumping out a frequency at a consistent rate, and it just goes on and on and on. And so the founder or the father of resonant frequency devices as a healing modality was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Royal Raymond Rife. For anyone who's ever even put their toe in the pool when it comes to bioelectrical magnetic devices, you would have heard this guy's name. He is the founder. He's the father of this science. And what he's over time, this is like back in the early 30s and 40s and 1900s, but in today's environment, everybody thinks that he invented the frequency generator, which is completely wrong. What Dr. Royal Raymond Rife did was he invented the first microscope, so he could see viruses, he could see bacterium, and he could see. Before that, you didn't have anything that you could look at them. And because he invented this microscope, he had an engineering friend put together an analog frequency generator. Here's a picture of the first one. And then what he did was he would just basically broadcast with this frequency generator while he was looking through his microscope that he invented. He would look at different viruses and basically he also did 30 to 40 years of his life looking at what would happen when specific frequencies were basically broadcast at a petri dish with different viruses, and he identified over 40 different viruses, whether it be like mumps, rubella, measles, all these kinds of viruses at the time that were plaguing the country, and he found, with just incredible amounts of trial and error, the exact frequency that would actually that would basically destroy the cell walls of whatever viruses that he was attempting to try to basically kill, and then he would basically notate that frequency, and he called those the mortal oscillatory rate, or MOR, MOR frequency, for very specific types of ailments. And then what you could do at that point, once you identified what the MOR was for a specific condition, let's say rubella at the time, then a patient could come in with rubella. He would basically sit them in a chair, put a big antenna next to them, and play that frequency through their body. It would destroy the rubella viruses inside that patient, and that's how we would cure them. And so he basically was the father of this concept of broadcasting frequency through living organisms to find and specific frequencies for specific ailments. And can you imagine, this has been over 100 years now since he started that, and more frequencies have been found since then. And so the whole idea behind the concept of these devices, and it kind of comes down to this simple phrase, hummers versus ringers. And in this world, we're talking about hummers, frequencies that just are broadcast and remain steady. And the concept is it's easier to see a picture of it than actually try to verbally explain it. But you'll look at these are 4 different waveforms of a frequency that can come out, and the idea is that the frequencies broadcast, and it either is a sine wave or a square wave and so forth. But the idea is that the distance between the peaks or the valleys of a waveform determines its frequency, and of course you got your power, your frequency, and then the different form of the wave. And based on any one of those three criteria, and you can imagine how hard it was to go through, literally thousands and thousands of different combinations for him to find those very specific frequencies that could do specific things. And he did that. And then a lot of people, a lot of other incredible scientists have picked up his work since the 1930s and 40s and have carried on his work. And so today's world, there are lots of different examples of resonant electromagnetic field devices that produce a frequency. And so you'll get everything from devices like this to, it's just, there's so many devices out there. And I can actually get a lot more detailed about individual ones. I actually own all of these types of devices at one time or another. But, you can use like anything from like this one's, here's a multi-wave oscillator. This one's a frequency generator from Spooky. This is a GB4000. That's a blood electrifier. This is a soda light wand and so forth. But all of these different devices produce a frequency, and that frequency, and or you could choose a frequency, and or you could run a set of frequencies, and those frequencies, when applied to living organisms, whether it's your a petri dish, your dog, cat, you, plants, you name it, and depending on the frequency, power, and the waveform, you'll be able to achieve various results. So that's what you would call resonant. Okay, hummers, devices that hum. Now the other type. What they do. A little bit more explanation here, is the effects of a resonant frequency device. Primarily, the most important thing is that it induces electroporation. Now, electroporation is a very, very important aspect of electromagnetic field devices, and because what that does is it just try to take the analogy of a ping pong ball and a golf ball. Now, a ping pong ball represents your cell, or any cell, plant cell, your cell, blood cell, whatever. And it's a cell, and its cell has a cell wall. Plants have cell membranes, right? So, I'm sorry, the other way around. Plants have cell walls, and people have cell membranes, but they're solid all the way around. And then what happens is when a frequency or basically a current of electricity passes through a living organism cell, okay, it'll basically puff out like a golf ball. And so it looks like a ping pong ball. Electricity passes through it, or a frequency, right? Which is basically a burst of electrons. And all of a sudden, the cell will pop up like a golf ball where there's just nothing but divots all around it. Okay, so the wall or the membrane now has all these little divots in it. And what the divots are, it's just a thinning of the wall or the thinning of the membrane. And where it gets thin, it enables anything else in the bloodstream or anything else in the lymphatic fluid around the cell to get into the cell easier. Okay? Now, that's a good thing if you've got, in combination with, you have let's say colloidal silver in your bloodstream at the time, or you've got ozone water, or I'm say ozone in your system, where it induces you can put oxygen into the cell, or you've got any other types of medicines, herbs, essential oils, any of those kinds of molecules floating around including C60, floating around in your body, and you electroporate, then you can actually absorb more. Your cells can pop up like a golf ball, and through those thinnings of the membranes can absorb more of those nutrients or substances into the cell, itself. And by doing so, just to give you an example, if you take vitamin C, for example, it's water soluble. So if you take any amount of vitamin C, you're only going to absorb maybe 19 or 20% of it, and the rest of it just gets flushed out through your urinary tract. Okay. But if you take vitamin C and then you electroporate, you increase the amount of vitamin C you're able to absorb by around 10, a factor of 10. One of the most important things that everybody warns you about when you're doing any kind of electroporation, either through resonant or pulsed electromagnetic frequencies, is, do not take in chemicals or alcohol or anything that would be bad if you took more of it. Like you wouldn't want to drink a beer, electroporate, and then you have like basically a 10x effect from the alcohol in the beer. Well, I'm sure some of you would like that, but the idea though is that huge warnings. Don't be drinking while you're doing that and that kind of thing. If you're going to take a Tylenol, take a little bit of a Tylenol, not your regular dose, because once you zap, you're going to get a 10 times basically absorption rate because of the act of electroporation. So it's very, very, very important. But it's also this incredible effect that nothing else will do for you, and that's what basically bioelectrical magnetics do to living organisms. And then also too, it's anti-pathogenic. I mean, there are numerous pathogens that absolutely cannot handle or survive a zap through whether it's pulsed or just a frequency. They just don't exist. Of course, Rife proved that through the more frequencies, but it will kill off. It will basically eliminate pathogens and that's other living organisms in your body that aren't you. Like funguses, viruses, bacteriums, and molds. Those things are all, they're constantly in our bloodstreams. We pick them up everywhere, breathing them in daily. And if you wanted to detox from pathogens, doing something like blood electrification or just using one of these devices will be very beneficial towards helping you detox out pathogens. It also, and then of course, causes detoxification. If you're basically killing off pathogens, you are detoxing. And another major warning when using these devices is watch out for the Herxmeyer symptoms, where you detox too fast, you do too much too fast. You will have detox symptoms because your body's not able to process out all of, let's say, the stunned and or dead organisms in you. Your body needs to flush them out, right? And if you do too much too fast, you have more toxins floating around in you or in dead pathogens than your body's able to flush out of you, and you will have basically a detox reaction, which is the opposite of what you were trying to do to begin with. And so we can get more into that later too as well. And then of course there's cellular entrainment. Now cellular entrainment in just general, is the idea of living organisms having their own frequency and their own resonating frequency. And that's something that is been measured that I think, like, if you look at the human body and you look at human cells, I think they resonate around 50 milliamps. And different cells have different frequencies, as again, proven by Rife. And so, let's say if you had a diseased or damaged set of cells in your body and they're not resonating at the normal frequency, let's say that, I'll just throw out a number that it's 20, like whatever 20 units are, but it's like its normal is 20. As an example, and it's running around 15, it's damaged or something. Well, if you play just like tuning forks, if you take one fork and you don't do anything with it and just leave it holding your hand, take a different fork in your other hand and bang it, and then hold it next to the first fork will start resonating at the same frequency as the one that's ringing, and that's called entrainment. And you will basically do that with your cells. So one of the ideas of resonant frequency treatment is to play a frequency that's the normal healthy frequency for whatever cells that you're trying to treat, and it'll basically, through cellular entrainment, get those other damaged cells to start ringing at the same healthy frequency, and it helps your body heal itself. And that's the concept of cellular entrainment. So this is how do you kind of figure out if you've got which one you're buying. Sometimes it is very confusing for people who aren't used to this, but these are some steps here that if you want to know, like, am I buying a resonant frequency device, or how do I tell the difference between pulse and resonant? But the thing that you'll listen for is the keywords here, like Rife frequencies or Nogier frequencies, or the types of the other set of frequencies out there for devices that you can buy. Now, the third type of device that I'd mentioned earlier, you've got your hummers, which I just described, and you've got ringers. Now, your ringers are a frequency, but it's also at a very, very high-powered frequency. I mean, it could be very high-powered, but it's much higher power than a normal hummer. Hummers are just broadcast at the same level of power, X number of watts of output, but a ringer is a pulsed electromagnetic field. So it's an actual pulse. So if you've ever heard of the concept of EMP, electromagnetic pulse, so this is exactly what that is. And this is a PEMF, pulse electromagnetic field device. And what it is, it's just a broadcast frequency at a very high power where it just pops up, and then it just rings like a bell, and it just bing, and then it just kind of, basically, it gets lower and lower, and then it rings again. And so these are pulsing devices, as opposed to just straightforward humming. Your ringers have a very similar effect as the hummers, but because of that first initial pulse of electricity and a big pop, they actually have there are some different effects from those devices because of the way that the waveform has been structured. And those devices come out, and you'll see these more like in your chiropractic offices, but you'll see these pulse electromagnetic where they're pulsing, not humming but ringing. And these are the kind of devices you'll see in your chiropractic office. You'll see these if you go to barns. It's very, very popular in the horse industry, especially in the race industry today. I mean, this is actually one that's made for horses, and you're basically toting it around the barn. In the most recent Kentucky Derby, 16 horses, I think 22 or something, were treated with PEMF before and after the race. It is a very legitimate science. There's a lot of studies backing. It is an accepted practice right now. And so this is one of the things that it's used for. These are very expensive devices. Just like one of these is easily $12,000. It's not a cheap device to own, but it has an incredible effect on basically. Actually, let me just get to the next slide. I'll tell you what the effects are. But that's what these devices do. You can get a small one for the home, get one for the barn, get one for the chiropractic offices. They come in pads that you can lay on and exercise on and so forth. And that's what these are. These are pulsers. Okay. Now the effects of pulsers, as I was getting into, is it stimulates the lymphatic system and it increases oxygen to the cells. So that pulse of energy is so important. Because it's not just a constant hum, but it's a ring. It's a pop, and then it just pitters out. And that ring and that first bolt of energy actually opens up the blood cells. It decouples your red blood cells from each other, increases the surface area of all your red blood cells because they're not coupled together like little rolls of coins. And that allows your red blood cells to basically absorb more oxygen into your body. It moves your fluids around. So if you are a horse or you're a human and you've had a very strenuous workout or you pulled a muscle or something like that, getting a PEMF treatment, right, will open up all your cells. It'll open up your blood cells. It'll move fluids around, and it'll help you recover so much faster. I've done this so many times, and it is a fantastic methodology to actually help reduce pain and recover from exertion. Of course, it also reduces inflammation. That's part of the whole lymphatic system. And it reduces pain because of that ability. And again, the PEMF also does electroporation, as the Resonant ones do. It also causes detoxification, and it's also antipathogenic. And that's what's one of the magic things about these devices in this modality in terms of treating and curing and helping, is that they have really incredible benefits that most people don't, they don't consider that. And most people are pill poppers. And pill popping comes with a lot of side effects. And one of the things I will tell you about all of this, there's only one real side effect. And that one real side effect is detoxification. That if you do too much too fast, you're gonna have a detox symptoms, which will usually is like flu-like symptoms or rashes and things like that. But there's never going to be where you have such a you have a like this. You're not going to get a 3-page list of things you got to worry about. And 3% of the people who tried it died, kind of thing. This doesn't happen with this type of modality. So it is very safe and it is very effective. And so I do highly recommend trying any one of these three. And then the main thing now is what's the difference? Okay, so I want to make sure I go back over the difference. And it comes down to this. It's so simple. Okay, can you feel it? If you can feel it, like you can feel that that pulse. That's quite simple. Then it's going to be a ringer. If you can't feel it, then it's going to be a hummer. Okay, so if it's something like this, you don't feel a thing. It's just a frequency passing through your body. That's a hummer. But if you feel a pulse and you're actually feeling this boom, 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 then it's definitely a ringer. It's going to be a PEMF type of device. So that's my introduction to bioelectrical magnetic devices. I hope you've learned something. You found it interesting. This is my passion. I don't know why. I just find it so interesting, and I've been studying it for a very long time, and I've spent way more money than I needed to on all these different devices. But I'd be more than happy to share them with you as we walk through each one of those types of devices one by one, and what I've done with them and how well they work and so forth. So happy to share as always. Thank you for watching. Really appreciate your time. I know you're busy, so thank you, and aloha. Have a great day.